Barrett Sallee, CBS Sports, joining us now. Barrett, how much of a disaster for the Big Ten brand has been everything going on in the Big Ten since they basically made the decision to cancel their season in early August?
It's been incredibly damaging. You know, it's been on the level of the Pac-12 networks not getting on DirecTV, and had the Big Ten not have, you know, the biggest revenue in all of college sports, I think we'd be talking about the Big Ten even worse than the Pac-12, which is crazy considering, you know, how football crazed that area is. But it just goes back to the lack of self-awareness of the president and Commissioner Kevin Warren. It goes back to poor leadership, and I think more importantly, poor management on a whole lot of levels, not just at the top.
Yeah, and what do you think is going to ultimately end up happening here? I've obviously been talking to a lot of people. I'm sure you have as well. Is there any way in your mind that the Big Ten rectifies their idiocy and finds a way to play in the fall? And I don't mean in the fall in like Thanksgiving with a sort of a weird winter, you know, late fall season. I mean actually plays when the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12 are playing and competes in the college football playoff.
You know, Clay, I think there's a chance, but it's more like a Lloyd Christmas and Dumb and Dumber, so you're telling me a chance. There's a chance. You know, I think that the goal here now, you know, is not just to get football played and save revenue, although that is a big part of it. It's also inclusion in the college football playoff. You know, I think when the Big Ten postponed their season, they thought everybody would follow suit, which, again, shows massive lack of self-awareness. But I think they thought that they could make the college football playoff happen in spring, and now they're on the outside looking in. Even the Pac-12, or at least, you know, that's at least trying to find ways to make things happen. But, you know, starting at Thanksgiving, you can't do that. You know, starting October 10th, okay, maybe you can fit in, you know, 9-10 games and, you know, make yourself eligible for Selection Sunday on December 19th. So I think it's a small chance that it happens. Obviously, there's a push for, you know, some presidents to sort of garner support on their side. Ultimately, I don't necessarily think that it happens, due in large part because, you know, these presidents have a much bigger picture than athletics. They're worried about the entire student body. And you've seen students come back on campus and numbers have risen because there are more people on campus. That's kind of how math works. But, you know, I think those numbers still, I think in terms of a liability standpoint, will be enough to prevent those presidents to approve a start in, you know, early to mid-October.
All right, let's presume, and I think it's a very good presumption at this point, that the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12 all play this fall. If they finish the season and get into the playoff and everything goes well, what is the long-range hit to the Big 10 and the Pac-12 for not playing if these other conferences find a way to play?
Well, I think from a personnel standpoint, it's going to be really hard for recruits to buy into a conference that clearly doesn't value football the way others do. And that's the narrow mind, you know, of the college athlete, the high school athlete. They want to take that next step. They don't have the bigger picture in mind, nor should they. There's no reason for them to do that. So I think from a personnel standpoint, you're going to see everybody take a step back. You know, the teams like Ohio State and Penn State, you know, they're still going to be competitive because they're still, you know, branded programs, but everybody else going to take a pretty significant step back. I think from a financial standpoint, you're going to see those programs simply unable to compete from a spending standpoint, from a revenue standpoint, as a conference that are playing, because you have to have the money to lure assistant coaches. You have to have the money to build these nice facilities. And while revenue is going to take a major hit across the board, you know, the SEC, ACC, and Big 12 are at least salvaging something. So from a revenue standpoint, you'd think long-term that, yes, while the Big Ten has, you know, a lucrative deal with the Big Ten Network, that, you know, it's not going to be, you know, the money's not going to flow as freely maybe as it used to.
Are we done in your mind with players deciding to sit out? We've seen, obviously, Georgia with quarterbacks, LSU with wide receivers. Do you think top players in the ACC, SEC, and Big 12 have all made their decisions, or do you think there's still more sort of dominoes to fall potentially here before the final rosters are set?
I think there are a few, mostly because the SEC starts so late. The ACC's next weekend, Big 12, is a little closer. So I think for those conferences, you're starting to see it wind down. I think the SEC has a lot more in store, because it does start so late. And really, you don't have, game time sort of bearing down on these coaches and on these kids. So, any message that a coach, put across to, their players before the season say, hey, like, if you're out, we want to know now. The SEC still has time. There are players who still can say, all right, look, I'm out, an agent talked to me, or, my parents need some money, family situation changed, or whatever. So I think there's that element to it. But I think there's a second wave, and you've seen this throughout the last couple of years with the 4-game redshirt rule. Kelly Bryant bails after 4 games and lets Trevor Lawrence start 2 years ago. We saw other players bail mid-season. Blake Barnett, former Alabama quarterback, it did that. We saw Nate Craig Myers, an Auburn wide receiver, bail after 4 games. So I think you're going to see more opt-outs, and I think you're going to see more open-ended opt-outs through the season where guys say, all right, look, I'm hurt, I'm banged up a little bit, I got this free year of eligibility, so I'm going to opt out of this season and then figure out, month, 2 months, 3 months from now, am I going to the draft or am I coming back knowing that I preserved a year of eligibility thanks to the NCAA basically giving everybody a freebie this year?
All right, let's presume that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 are not going to find a way to play. And so let's go into the SEC, let's go into the ACC, let's go into the Big 12. In the SEC, who do you think? I think there's a good chance there would be 2 playoff teams coming out of the SEC before all is said and done. Who do you think, now that Georgia's got a little bit of uncertainty at the quarterback position, to you are the Gators the favorite in the East, and is anybody going to be able to challenge Alabama this year, particularly given all the losses that LSU has already seen?
Yeah, I picked the Gators in the East before Jamie Newman opted out, and I picked them after that. The story, actually, our SEC picks went up on CBSSports.com yesterday. I just think Florida wide receiving core is great. The defense, even though it's filling some holes, especially up front, trust Todd Grantham. He's evolved as an assistant coach throughout the course of his college career. And I love Kyle Trask. He's never been a starting quarterback in an offseason ever because De'Aaron King started in front of him at Manville High School in Texas. Yes, it's been a disjointed offseason, but, he's still, getting those reps as an unquestioned first-team running back or a quarterback, even in preseason camp when they're doing, optional workouts. So I like Florida a lot. I think there are too many questions offensively for Georgia. And then in the West, Alabama to me is a major step ahead because of all the talent they have, especially experienced talent on offense, most notably up front on that offensive line. If I had to pick a team outside of Alabama, it would be a stretch. I think Alabama's going to run away with it. But if I had to pick somebody else, it would probably be Auburn. I think Bo Nix is going to take a pretty big step forward. Yeah, they have some issues on the offensive line. I think those can be replaced pretty easily. Defensive line certainly a problem, but they still have talent there. But I'm hearing great things about all of their running backs. And if you have some questions, offensively, we know how Gus Malzahn is. He finds a way to pound the rock no matter how he has to do it. So if I had to pick a team outside of Alabama, it would be Auburn because of that. And also, of all the coaches in the SEC, Gus Malzahn knows how to beat Nick Saban better than anybody. And you could say maybe even more than Dabo Swinney in the ACC, considering his track record. So considering Gus's track record. So I would probably side with Auburn, but I would do it reluctantly.
Do you think Arkansas and Vanderbilt will go 0-10?
Vanderbilt will. I think Arkansas will find a way to get a win. I don't know where. Maybe Mississippi State, maybe Missouri. I don't know where it's going to be. But I do think, look, they've got a pretty decent offense. Rakeem Boyd's a really good running, but he ran for 1,000 yards last year. And there was nobody else on that offense, right? Like, there's nobody else on that offense. So I think Arkansas is going to find a way. I am disappointed, Clay, and you know Greg Sankey as well as I do. I'm just really disappointed they didn't match those two teams up. I really am. Maybe we'll get them in a bowl game because there aren't enough teams to fill bowl games, but I really am disappointed they didn't match them up. Hey, maybe they can go to Shreveport and play in the Poland Weed Eater Independence Bowl.
All right, ACC. Can anybody challenge Clemson? Do you think Notre Dame is that team? Anybody else?
I think if anybody, it's Notre Dame. I think the gap is pretty significant. But, Notre Dame, Ian Book does not get the credit he deserves at quarterback. He's been really solid. I think their offensive line has been a strength for a while now. I think that'll continue, so that makes things a lot easier along the offensive line, or really offense in general. Defense, I think they've got a pretty solid crew. I wonder, if there's going to be a little bit of a shot dealing with, different kinds of teams, different styles of offenses in the ACC full time, even though they do see those teams, 4 or 5 times a season, based on that affiliation agreement. But I think Notre Dame is probably going to be that team that, at least gives Clemson a test. Obviously it's in South Bend, and then maybe in the ACC championship game. It would be a stretch, a massive, massive stretch for me to say, Miami or Florida State or Louisville or even North Carolina can put up much of a challenge to the Clemson Tigers.
What about the Big 12? What do you see there?
Dude, I am so excited about Big 12 football. I don't know why people aren't paying attention to it. It is going to be so much fun. Oklahoma State with Chuba Hubbard and Spencer Sanders and Tylan Wallace back off an injury at wide receiver. That team's going to be awesome. I cannot wait to see Oklahoma State. Obviously, people forget about Baylor. Like, no one talks about Baylor. They went to the Sugar Bowl last year, and they've got a kid in Charlie Brewer at quarterback who has been awesome for them, and weapons outside. New coach Dave Aranda might be a little different, but Dave Aranda's a genius. I think anybody in the SEC knows that. The whole Texas is back thing with Sam Ehlinger, that's always fun. But Brock Purdy and Iowa State, man, they've got some offensive linemen. They've got some defensive linemen. If you can, win in the trenches, especially, against exotic teams like you see in the Big 12, you're going to be doing all right. So I'm pumped about the Big 12. I still think Oklahoma wins it. And Spencer Rattler, I do trust that he's going to have a pretty good season. But this is going to be a year, Clay, in the Big 12 where you might have a 2-loss champion. And if that happens, then you might not only get 2 SEC teams in, you might get 3.
No doubt. All right, final question. That would really drive Big Ten fans even crazier. Final question for you. I am going to hop in my car in a little bit. I'm bringing my family down. We're staying in the hotel overlooking the Braves Stadium to try to watch Braves games. Have you been to that hotel? What kind of view do you think we'll have?
It depends on which floor you're on. Lower, it's going to be hard. Upper, you're going to be able to see it. I would go to the pool, and the pool is fantastic. But get this. I'm taking my son for his 9th birthday in the stadium to watch the game on Sunday afternoon. They have the Chop House open for season ticket holders. So
I've heard about that.
It's good at the Omni, but you should come down to the Battery. We can hang out and grab an early beer before I get to see a game in the stadium, and you're relegated to the luxurious Omni Hotel.
I felt like I was in a good spot until then. I'll shoot you a text. That's Barrett Sallee. I'm Clay Travis. Final segment of the week next. This is Outkick on Fox Sports Radio.